The total weekly cost for a company to make X high-quality watches is given by the formula C of X equals 10X plus 300 if the weekly revenue from selling all X watches is R of X equals 161X minus 0.5X squared. How many watches must they sell a week to break even? So we did something similar for our homework problem. First, you need to understand what C of X and R of X are. C of X are basically the cost to make or produce those watches. And R of X are all the revenues that are coming from selling all X watches. In order to break even, you want to make sure that the cost and the revenue, they are identical. Therefore, let's write it down. Break even, what does it mean? It means the cost C of X equals the revenue R of X. So we write it down like this, and that's going to help us determine the equation. Apparently, they want you to find out at what value of X will this statement true. So let's just plug in the formula. C of X is 10X plus 300, and then R of X is 161X minus 0.5X squared. So this will be our equation. We just need to solve this for X, and then we'll be able to find out the answer. This is a quadratic equation. So for quadratic equation, I always recommend that you put everything on one side of the equation, 0 on the other side. And which side you're going to put everything at? You're going to look at the coefficient of your X squared. The coefficient of X squared right now is negative 0.5. We usually want it to be positive. So that means we need to move these two terms to the left-hand side. So we're going to do inverse operations of plus 0.5x squared and then minus 161x. So these two are the inverse operations. Let's do that. Plus 0.5x squared minus 161x. So these are the inverse operations that we need to do. Let's perform the inverse operation. We have 0.5x squared minus 151x and then plus 300 equals 0. So this is our quadratic equation if we put everything on one side and keeping the coefficient of x squared positive. Before we continue, I would do one more transformation. Notice that we have a coefficient that's a decimal. And, if you can avoid that decimal, then avoid that decimal. How do we avoid that decimal? Well, some of you might think that we could multiply everything by 10. Yes, you could do that. But I can also just multiply everything by 2. Because, 0.5 times 2 is 1, which is actually better than multiplying everything by 10. So if I multiply everything by 2, I will get 1x squared minus 302x plus 600 equals 0. So this is a quadratic equation that we can solve by factoring quadratic formula or completing the square. Factoring is, in my opinion, probably the easier one for this case. So how do you factor this? Let's do x squared. That comes from x times x. Next, 600. It comes from two factors. There are a lot of factors, but if you look at the middle term, first of all, it's negative 302. That means both of these two numbers must be negative. And then, can you come up with two numbers such that when you multiply, you get 600. When you add them, you get negative 302. Well, it's negative 300 and negative 2, right? So these two numbers will work. If we check out by doing cross multiplication, we can see that it's negative 2x minus 300x, and that's negative 302x. It's exactly what we need. Therefore, we factor the left-hand side into x minus 300 times x minus 2. This product is 0. By the zero product property, each of them could be 0. And then you solve for each of them. X could be 300 or x could be 2. And because it's a quadratic equation and both solutions are positive, you could simply answer that is sell 300 watches or 2 watches a week will break even. So you could say it will break even when selling 300 watches or 2 watches a week. So as you can see, either one of them will work. And that's our final answer.